occupational therapist at RPI, and I just wanted to go over a few joint protection techniques specific to the hand, especially the thumb and the wrist, because that's what seems to be most prone to overuse injuries. The thumb in specific is prone to overuse injuries involving heavy resistance because so much of what we do takes our thumb. And a heavy pinch, we put more strain through that joint than we need to. At the wrist, it's more prone to repetitive use because it only really does a few motions. It's much less flexible than the thumb. But when are you not using your wrist also? So it goes constantly moving all day. And different diagnoses tend to come from that. At the wrist, I think the most common thing I see that could be prevented is carpal tunnel. At the thumb, we get into arthritis, tendonitis, those kinds of things there. So with the thumb, it's a more flexible joint. It's also less stable. And a good principle across all your joints to maintain is don't put heavy force through a joint at end range. This makes a lot of sense in bigger joints. Like if you think of the shoulder, you would never carry a gallon of milk out here or out here. Obviously that would hurt and you would know it's bad for that joint. We don't follow those same rules when it comes to your hand because you're just used to it doing everything, but those same rules still apply. So you think of open end range and closed end range. And for the thumb, here's open, which if you think of when you have to grasp something too wide, I'm a hypocrite here. My giant travel mug hurts my thumb all the time, and I have to implement joint protection techniques because here's that open position of the thumb lifting a heavy thing and you'll hear it pop or you'll hear a soreness. The best principle that I can talk about as far as using that joint at an end range, if it's going to be that wide, you need to use two hands instead of one. And it's just developing that habit. It's hard to do, but it's going to spare you some injury. So both hands or top and bottom. This is true of wide things. It's also true of heavy things, which uses that joint in its most closed position, or this pinch. So when you lift something very heavy with that pinch, the cast iron skillet, when you are moving, groceries, pots and pans, I think of all my household stuff. That weight through a closed joint is not good, the same way as lifting a gallon of milk across your body like this. Same rule applies there. Use both hands. Put a pot holder on and hold the skillet. At the wrist, repetitive use. Sustained wrist flexion is what puts you at the most risk for carpal tunnel. You'll start to get tingling in these three fingers, and it usually comes from working, prep cooks or anything like that. I see sustained wrist flexion like this, even if it's light, to do anything, to work, to type, it closes off this spot of your wrist, which is where your carpal tunnel passes. So keeping that part open, and that's basically keeping an either neutrally rotated wrist straight, no flexion, or what's better is a little bit of extension when you function. And the last big piece of advice I could give that applies to both the wrist and the thumb is be aware of how small those joints are. Don't use a small joint for a big strain. For example, say we're stirring here, see how my thumb is closed and pinching, applying force at its most closed point. Also, all this motion is coming through a bent wrist, moving really quick, and it's just daily life, but it's terrible for you. So a better way, dagger position. Look, that thumb is not in that pinched, closed off point. It's here, around your fist, maintaining that open thumb. Work through an elbow, work through a shoulder. And it's a habit that's awkward to get into, but again, you're not going to be prone to these painful and preventable conditions.